Well, actually, folks, as you and Adam were just talking, Lauren, the president just put out a new tweet. Let's read it to you right now. The fake news media will not talk about the importance of the United Nations Security Council's 15-0 vote in favor of sanctions on North Korea. All right, let's bring in right now to respond to all of this Ambassador John Bolton, former U.S. ambassador to the UN. He, of course, is a Fox News contributor. Ambassador, it's great to have you here tonight.
Glad to be with you.
All right, the president once again saying that the media is not talking about it. We're talking about it with you. Do you think that the sanctions, and this was the U.S. that led this charge over the weekend, are the sanctions going to be effective when it comes to North Korea? $1 billion in exports that we're trying to cut off from that country.
Right. Well, I think it's an important political victory. I do think it shows the opposition internationally to what North Korea is up to. But I think there's effectively zero chance that this sanction will be enforced. We've seen sanctions going back to 2006 against North Korea from the Security Council. They've been ignored. And, you know, the estimate here is that if enforced, the sanctions would eliminate $1 billion out of North Korea's total of $3 billion of export earnings. I'd still like to know where those numbers came from. You know, North Korea, it turns out, is expert at counterfeiting American money. And I don't think they released that in their official export statistics.
Really?
So exactly what the real impact here is, I think, is very hard to determine. I say again, the political impact is significant, but I wouldn't count on the economic impact.
And we need China to get on board with this, and maybe China's not going to be on board with this. I think that's the fear. If you look at the People's Daily this morning and that editorial they put out, front page of their paper editorial saying, well, you know, just hold on just a moment. I do want to move, though, from North Korea over to Russia, because there's a lot going on with regards to the Russians, and we need them to deal with North Korea as well. You had Secretary of State Rex Tillerson saying that the United States is going to respond to Russia's cutting of U.S. diplomats by September 1st. Now, Russia had made the decision to cut diplomats in retaliation for the U.S., as you know, expelling Russian diplomats for punishment for meddling in the election. Ambassador, what do you make of this statement by Tillerson that we need to have a relationship with the Russians no matter what?
Well, that's true. But on the other hand, this was a pretty significant retaliation by Moscow, and I'm sure it was ordered by Putin directly. And in the normal course of things at the State Department, people would have been gaming out alternative scenarios for what the Russians might do when the sanctions legislation was signed. Certainly expelling American diplomats is a quick and easy thing for the Russians to do. So what would our response be to that? And to say we obviously haven't really had one to date and that it won't be coming till September the 1st, I find hard to understand. I think Putin, obviously he doesn't like the sanctions, and he was fighting back, and I think he needs to know this is just the beginning of the pain Russia might feel.
Of course he doesn't like the sanctions, but, you know, I hate to say it, but there are things that we do need to work with them on. Syria, North Korea, Iran. I mean, these are major threats to the sovereignty of the United States.
Yeah, well, not that talking to them is going to improve any of those issues, but if you need to, there's always a lot of conference space in Geneva. You know, this is people love to go there.
Yeah.
This is purely political, cutting the number of personnel at our embassy there by as much as the number that the Russians picked. And we have not really responded to it yet. So you want to avoid just a tit-for-tat kind of exchange. You also need to make it clear to the Russians what we object to is their interference in our election and their unacceptable behavior in Eastern and Central Europe.
We object to that, but I think it's interesting that the Secretary of State of the United States is saying, is this something that we want to completely blow the relationship with the Russians over when we do need them on certain issues? And then I think it was fascinating that he brought that up in Manila earlier today.